What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick.
I'm Jammin John.
And we have yet another album review. And one that I feel like I probably should have listened to this band years ago, but I didn't get around till right now. And since this week was a little bit sparse in terms of bigger releases, we kind of dug around and found some pretty nasty filth in the underground. And well, this kind of just fits with what we like. So we're going to go over the latest offering from Putrid Offal, Obliterated Life. This also comes out on the 11th of April on Time to Kill Records. This band formed in 1990 in France. Now they have kind of an interesting timeline. They formed in 1990 and then broke up in 1995. And in that period, they never released a full length. They only released, I believe, 4 splits. Then they reformed in 2013, and that's when they started releasing stuff on their own, EPs and full lengths, which I just think is kind of interesting. And, I figured that needed to be explained because this is only their 3rd full length, though, again, they do have 4 splits, 2 demos, and 2 EPs. And baseline, you could just flat out call this death grind because that is exactly what this is. Straight to the point, death grind, riffs, grindcore, just good, violent fun. And pretty much a band that I could 100% see playing the soundstage at MDF.
Yep.
This is pure soundstage energy. Who knows, they probably already have in the past.
Yeah, if it would have been like these guys and Necessary Death and Noisy Neighbors and Hemorrhage, I mean, you would have had me right there. And they would have fit right on that stage. In fact, I kind of had the same vision for parts of this record. So might be because we're prepping to go to MDF that I'm just starting to think everybody would be good on the soundstage. But, I've heard of this band. I know I've heard of this band. When you said Putrid Offal, I was like, I've heard of this band. But I've never heard them. Surprise, surprise. But this guy hasn't either until today, so I'm not alone. I'm not the lone dickhead that doesn't hear anything anymore. We're both in that department today.
Yeah, actually, we were in that department last time, too, with Bessa.
Oh, we also were?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Hey, dual department unity here. You just cut that.
I might leave that in now.
Leaving the whole thing.
Yeah, why not?
Even where I say cut it.
Yep. Anyway, I only jammed a couple of singles by this band just to kind of get a feel for them. And I mean, again, like I said, this is straightforward death grind. This is very familiar territory for me. A lot of stuff in here that reminds me of kind of multiple phases of Napalm Death's career. In particular, some of Napalm Death's more groove-laden era, mostly, Fear, Emptiness, Despair. Maybe a little bit of Words from the Exit Wound too, but there's some fun hardcore bounces, especially in songs like Meat Stall and Boning Hall. These are fun song titles. I don't know what a Boning Hall is, but it sounds like it could be fun. Is that the hallway that connects all the different fuck rooms and the whole Eyes Wide Shut party?
Oh, maybe it is.
Could be.
Maybe it is.
It's probably something much gorier.
Probably nothing remotely close to that, but I'm going to go with that.
But a lot of this is just blast beats, D beats, really fun riff changes. That was something that really kind of jumped out at me because this band, there's this constant flip between death metal tremolos, and they do those shorter measures that you hear in grindcore too, but that down-pick grind riffs, again blast beats, and a lot of fun drum pattern shifts, Life Consumed in particular. That one kind of ran the gamut of pretty much every death grind beat. You had a blast beat, you had D beats, there were some fun 2-steps. There was even this snare roll sort of blast in there too. And just some good solid hardcore grooves that kind of pop up in there. But yeah, this is mainly about riffs and energy and musical violence.
And there's no shortage of that. There's no shortage of awesome transitions. All of these songs, flat out, there wasn't a song on this album that I didn't like that's not jam-packed full of riffs and crazy transitions. And being intensely violent, there's no shortage of that whatsoever in this record, especially in the 3-song run between Agony Prevails, Messy Flesh, and Ribcage Blues. All 3 of those songs, all combined, you're looking at probably 4 minutes of music.
Maybe.
Agony Prevails is a 27-second banger. Actually, it's really cool. A lot of great crawling riffs in that song.
A lot of rotten sound, gadget, nauseum sort of energy. It's just a violent blast beat fest, and then it's over.
Yep. And then into Messy Flesh, which is actually a pretty creepy song. That is something I really like about this, is there's a lot of tremolos all over this record, and for the most part, they're all pretty gnarly, pretty evil sounding, and mostly creepy. And Messy Flesh in itself is actually pretty creepy. A lot of descending, crawling riffs going on there, but the vocals, and we'll dig a little bit deeper into the vocals here in a moment, but the vocals in here, you get a lot of like creepy chanting. And that starts happening throughout the remainder of the record.
Honestly, the vocals are probably one of like the biggest atmospheric things on here. Like, often it's, alternating growls and screams. I believe the guitarist does backup vocals on here. And it kind of works a bit of that like carcass dynamic, but I feel like it's kind of closer to like Napalm Death between like Barney and Mitch, because the higher screams are very shrill and very just, kind of sizzly sounding. But the main singer does a lot of these like whispered and groaned vocals, and sometimes they're really effective. Like that track in particular, Messy Flesh, like there's a whole section where it drops out to like a drum and bass sort of groove, and then you just hear like the satanic groaning and muttering like, Jammin John, what? And it was totally there. I heard it.
I must have missed that. I don't think I'm going to listen to that again.
You should definitely listen to it again.
It's a great track. Shit.
But it kind of like builds up the atmosphere, and then it comes in with like one of the more creepy sounding tremolo riffs in here, because a lot of these are just violent. Like you're either doing like tremolo riffs or like the big machine gun riffs when it comes down to like most of the death metal elements on here. But when it comes down to like the death metal elements in general, a lot of that is kind of reserved for the longer songs, which I was kind of surprised to see that there are 3 tracks on here over 4 minutes long. Darkness Awaits, Privilege of Pain, and one of the closing tracks, Theatrum Anatomicum. Longer songs generally aren't like a big thing in DEATHGRIND, but these definitely kind of like latch on to more like straight up death metal elements. The grind elements are kind of used more as like seasoning, especially on like Darkness Awaits. That one in particular has a very old school Carcass vibe to it. I love how it leads in with this just big, thunderous, just gnarly riff. Like this thing's just meaty as fuck. And it does this little tease. You all of a sudden you get this little stomped accent and builds in this, like kind of grindcore thing. And then it sharply cuts right back to that main riff. Like, all right, you're kind of teasing the fact that you're going to have a fucking gnarly shit fit here in a second, and I like it. The song slightly edges you, I guess we can say. But there's a payoff, though, because it does get into that grindcore fit, and it does this, again, like old school death grind thing. Like, it's a very much a, like, Symphonies of Sickness style Carcass sort of jam. Like, it's rotten, it's muddy, it's gross. You get the cool alternating vocals. And you get that on Privilege of Pain, too, which that comes in with just a broken down Carcass groove, like more along the lines of like necroticism.
You know what's interesting is on Privilege of Pain and Darkness Awaits, those 2 songs most specifically have a lot of melody, which I didn't see coming really at all, because that's not typically a thing for DEATHGRIND, but it makes it a little bit more melodeath, which is pretty weird.
Yeah, I mean, I expect like, catchy riffs. Like, catchy riffs don't necessarily have to be like super melodic, but there are some like interesting riff dynamics on here that go a little bit outside of DEATHGRIND, and adding just like a dose of melody on there kind of opened up the song. Like, you get some cool crawling lead melodies. They're not like, super bright or anything like that. They're more sinister and like just kind of like, evil sounding, but it does add something to the song other than just like flat out riffy violence.
Boning Hall has a straight up Sabbath melody in it. Ribcage Blues has another little hooky part.
Theatrum Anatomicum, or however the fuck you say that.
Yes.
Comes in with like galloping riffs and lots of like these machine gun riff driven like double time grooves. There's a lot of stuff on that song in particular that reminds me of like earlier Bolt Thrower, like the first 3 albums. Like we're not going past War Master on this one. This is like War Master and like Realms of Chaos almost specifically. The riffs are punishing, heavy, chuggy, and there are like some good melodic hooks to it, but it doesn't come across as like cheesy at all. Like, they're not trying to force in a classic heavy metal harmony or anything like that. It still stays rooted in just sounding dark and sinister up until the end of that song, where it kind of does get a little bit brighter. Like, you get a little bit more punk. Like, all of a sudden you get this D beat section, and I will admit, like, the riffs got a little bit brighter there. And there's some other interesting twists and turns. Like, I really wasn't expecting an instrumental, or at least with like a deathgrind band, I wasn't expecting an instrumental to be anywhere near 3 minutes. The Black Veil is probably, I would say, like the most pure like death metal song on here. Like, there's nothing grind about it. It is evil, dark, riffy, groovy, a lot of like old grave vibes to it.
Not only do you get that, but then it goes straight, almost death doom. Like, it really slows down quite a bit, and you get these big, like, Black Sabbath style evil melodies. Plus you get more creepy whispers, and you get chanting again, and like, so they really kind of like to ham it up as far as the theatrics are concerned.
And pretty much like the rest of the album, like all the tracks we haven't talked about, kind of just, again, do death grind well. They're energetic, they're blasty, they're not like doing too much of one thing, honestly. There's a pretty good pace here. It's kind of interesting because it does feel like it's broken down into sections. Like, comes in and absolutely just throttles you with the first few tracks on here, and then you kind of get this, carcass-like break towards the middle, and then all of a sudden you get like a flat-out grindcore fit, and then you get an instrumental, a bolt thrower track, and then the closing track in here, which, I don't know, the archives didn't quite list this one right because they had it at 14 tracks. There's actually 15 on Spotify, unless that's a Spotify exclusive.
Who knows?
Which that might very well be. But New Era, this song, I mean, it feels like an extra because I think the production on it's different. Mm-hmm. The production on here, I think, is pretty good. Like, it's pretty solid sounding. I like the guitar tone. I'm not sure if the drums are programmed or not. There's points where it sounds like it could be, but there's also points where it sounds like a natural drummer. I don't know. Maybe it's just like my ears and such.
I'm not 100%. There were parts where the snare drum gets isolated a little bit where I was like, that could be programmed. But it also could be that the mix was just different because the guitars are very present, very prominent, very crunchy, very big and beefy, and like nothing else really has that kind of modernized production sound to it. Like the vocals, I think, sit where they need to be, but they're a little bit off in the distance at times, and like, I'm not 100% about the drums. If they are programmed, they sound really good.
Yeah, but New Era sounds decidedly different. It's crisper. The guitars are even crunchier, if you can believe that. And I'm more than certain that it's actually like real drums in there. Like, that sounds absolutely real. So I don't know, like, if that's just like a Spotify exclusive, but it's a pretty good add-on. In terms of any negatives on here, I mean, at points I'd say, like, yeah, it's just, solid death grind. Like, it really doesn't do much new, but it does have fun in terms of like, hey, let's go off the reservation a little bit and, play around with some different styles a bit. I like the fact that, you got some like more carcass leaning stuff. That's always fun. Bassline, like a lot of this kind of reminds me like General Surgery. The more death metal leaning stuff occasionally reminds me of Cold Worker, which I miss that band. Again, it doesn't reinvent the wheel, but it's still fun to listen to. I will say that Privilege of Pain, though, I loved that song up until the end, which it kind of, I don't know if it wrote itself into a corner, but it turned into this like atmospheric thing towards the end, which I thought was just going to be, like a little transitional part, and then we just get hit with a good closing riff and then fade out on that. But it kind of stays in this atmospheric section. You get the muttered satanic vocals, they're kind of under his breath in the back of the mix. Probably said, John's address or something like that. Listen to it. I'm sure it's there. That did not feel like the way to end the song, because everything up to that point was killer.
And it's how long they did it for, too. They left at least a minute left to go of this guy just like talking or chanting or, giving away my social security number or something like that. Probably Nick's social security number.
It was definitely your address.
But what made that even more strange is how packed that song was dynamically. Like, there's so many riff changes going on in there, so many drum changes. Like, I mean, the drum changes are nonstop on this record, but that song most specifically, coming in with these big, beefy grooves and carcass vibes, you get D-beats, you got blast, you got the whole 9 yards. And so to end pretty much what I would have called, at least in the beginning, a pretty much epic song, you ended with a minute of just like, all right.
Yeah, and most of these songs are really solid, like all the way through. Like, they end, on a good note. Like, we'll either like kind of like rock out that last riff that kind of like grabbed you initially. Or they'll just like keep the beat down going and just give you one final blah at the end. Mass Murder, I thought was like a really fun one that kind of showed off their punky, more fun side. Like a lot of crusty riffs on there. Like this song in particular hasn't worn deodorant ever. Like it's that fucking crusty. But it was like a complete song. Like I didn't try to do anything extra. And, you know, like the extra bit on that song in particular, which again, like my big issue with that is the fact that it was such a good song up to that point. That was kind of a thing that hampered it a bit. But overall, I dug this. Like, I thought this was just a fun listen. Like, I'm a sucker for grindcore and death grind. Like, that kind of shit is just pure violent fun.
And that's what made this channel, let's be honest here.
Yeah. And, overall, I'm going to give this 3.5 stars. This was a fun listen. Like, it's just vicious. It kind of wants to fight you, maybe murder you in a back alley and then dismember you. Well, not me. Definitely John. That's the name I heard. But yeah, like this is just riffy and gnarly. Again, like a lot of stuff that reminds me of like General Surgery. There's some like Rotten Sound-esque moments on here. And I like that there's a good balance between death metal and grindcore. It doesn't seem like it favors one too much. If it did, I would say maybe death metal a little bit more. So if you're more of like a riff guy and want more death metal in your death grind, this might be your speed. But yeah, if you're a big fan of like exhumes, gadgets, napalm death, especially like a lot of like modern napalm death. Cold Worker, again, if anyone remembers that band, they were pretty damn awesome. Hemorrhage, yeah, just check this band out. It's pretty killer.
I'm gonna go ahead and give this a 4, actually. There isn't a song on this album that I didn't enjoy. Like, albeit I think the pacing is kind of weird at certain times, it's still not bad. All the tremolos I thought were pretty gnarly, pretty nasty sounding. This album is packed full of riffs. I love riffs. I'm a giant sucker for riffs, and even though you don't often get a bunch of riffiness in grind, this is death grind, and so they really played that card well. I get reminded a lot of Undeath as far as the riffing is concerned. Like, there's that many riff changes, and a lot of the riffs that they use are pretty fun. It didn't like weigh really heavily on one specific kind of riff, although there were a lot of crawling and like descending things going on. And you do get some times where you just get that, you know, which is in most grind. The riffs are fun, the songs are very entertaining, the vocals I think are really great as far as the pairing is concerned. Like, you don't get too much of the death growl and you don't get too much of the highs, but they work really well together, and that makes it kind of entertaining. Got big aborted vibes from that. So if you're a big fan, once again, of all the bands Nick mentioned, plus a couple more, again, aborted, I don't think you said that. Undeath, I really think that's big as far as the riffs are concerned. Carcass, Napalm Death, Hemorrhage, General Surgery, things like that. Probably going to want to check this out. I had a great time.
So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We also have memberships. They're only 99 cents, and our lone perk is doing a members-only live stream, which we will probably be doing one later this month. Maybe 420, maybe not.
Maybe.
But we will definitely be doing one. Memberships are the main way to support the channel now. We also still have our store, thrallsofmetal.com, which is linked down below. That has our t-shirts and hats and probably just those things. But yeah, if you're interested in them, that's where to find them. And of course, if you are interested in joining this channel, there's a join button down there for you to hit and punch, spit on. I don't know. It's grindcore. Do whatever the hell you want to it. Just, you know, probably don't destroy your computer. That'd be kind of shitty.
In the actual infamous words of Power Rapper the Rapper, kick punch. It's all in the mind. If you guys choose to join, that's great. If you don't, that's also great. Tons of content coming your way. Multiple discussion segments, Nick's never-ending collection updates, states of metal, is it metal, is it not metal, pretty much all metal all the time. Live streams that are not for members and live streams that are for members. We guarantee you that both will be phenomenally stupid. But we're glad that you joined, and we're glad that you watched. Thank you.
Yeah, you guys absolutely roll. Tons of content coming your way. So one more big thank you, because you guys are awesome, and we will catch you later.